We're going
And
live
three.
now? Okay.
And we are live. What is going on, people? Whether you're watching from LinkedIn or you're watching from Twitter or you're watching from YouTube, we are here. We're talking about embracing the Alpha Mission. We have Robert Blackwell Jr., Bruce Montgomery, and Cebien on the panel to give you energy, to give you insights, to talk about a lot of things. We got a lot to talk about in only an hour, so I won't bore you with all the sentimental details. At first, I want to do the honor and privilege of allowing everybody to go around and introducing themselves. Robert, would you care to be the honor of share a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and the purpose of Alpha Mission, just in a short, brief introduction?
Sure. My name is Robert Blackwell Jr. I grew up in Kansas, moved to Chicago, and I kind of describe myself as an unemployable math misfit. I've always been really interested in what we can do to help our people. So we kind of started the Alpha Mission, and we'll describe shortly what that is.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bruce, please introduce yourself briefly on who you are, and let's go into it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Montgomery. I'm here in Chicago as well, lifelong Chicagoan. I am a career participant in the information technology industry. I've been on every side of the table, from vendors to content producers to entrepreneurs to venture capital, and lifetime advocate for increasing opportunities for innovation to make a difference in the lives of people, particularly in the Black community, but in all communities, so they can be full participants in the free enterprise system. I am a strategic advisor to EKI Digital, and I'm also a director of the Just Do Business initiative, which is something that we'll be talking about quite a bit as we talk about the Alpha Mission.
Love it, love it. And last but not least, Cebien, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Troy, and glad to be part of this discussion. And so, hello, folks. Cebien Alty here. I am the founder and CEO of Cebien Enterprises, and we are a career provider and talent readiness company where we are upskilling diverse young professionals emerging in their undergrad career into early career opportunities such as internships, co-ops, and entry-level jobs. And we do this through an intensive professional development boot camp. And so by profession, I've spent the past 23 something odd years in the marketplace, collaborating with brands around talent management, acquisitions, and programming, and really looking forward to this conversation, especially highlighting the excellence and in talking about Black business and how we do it and how we elevate our Black and brown faces. So glad to be part of the conversation and looking forward to the dialogue. Thanks, Troy.
And last but not least, I'm your moderator, Troy Sandidge. I'm founder and CEO of Strategy Hackers. I'm a B2B marketing strategist. But enough about me. You didn't come here for me. We're here for an amazing discussion. So I'm willing and honored to have Robert get prepared and share the floor and talk about this is the core, kind of the 1/3 of the conversation right now, where he breaks down the Alpha Mission, and we'll discuss a few things throughout the conversation that what he wants to present with us.
Terrific. Thanks a million. I'm going to try to share my screen here. And just let me know whether you can see my screen.
Okay.
Does that work?
Did you hit the share your screen button?
I thought I did. Give me a
see.
second. Let me go back. Share. Oh, here we go. Share. Missed the second button.
Oh, there we go. Let's do
okay. How about now?
Yes, we are here.
Wonderful. Okay. Terrific. So I'm going to talk about the Alpha Mission. And this all kind of came about in, let's say, last summer. After the George Floyd thing happened, I wrote a series of articles called Love is a Verb. And the theme of that was that nobody could protect or feed their family based on your sympathy. So if you want to help somebody, go buy something from somebody. So I say you can't eat sympathy, so just do business. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we'll go through a presentation and then leave the back half of the meeting for discussion. So the Alpha Mission is about being determined to end the cycle of misery for Black people in our country. So I say, imagine how much better our country will be when we prove that the free enterprise system works for everybody, solely through the voluntary cooperation of people of goodwill. This is another one of my little goofy sayings, that if facts were enough, nobody would smoke or be a socialist. So we need, I believe, a movement of people of goodwill dedicated to proving that the free enterprise system works for everybody. I'm going to play this short video by President Kennedy. It's entitled, "We Choose to Go to the Moon." It's a little more than 3 minutes.
We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come. But condense, if you will, the 50,000 years of man's recorded history in a time span of but a half a century. Stated in these terms, we know very little about the first 40 years, except at the end of them, advanced man had learned to use the skins of animals to cover them. Then about 10 years ago, under this standard, man emerged from his caves to construct other kinds of shelter. Only 5 years ago, man learned to write and use a cart with wheels. Christianity began less than 2 years ago. The printing press came this year. And then less than 2 months ago, during this whole 50-year span of human history, the steam engine provided a new source of power. Newton explored the meaning of gravity. Last month, electric lights and telephones and automobiles and airplanes became available. Only last week did we develop penicillin and television and nuclear power. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ills as it dispels old. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. We shall send to the moon, 240,000 miles away, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago? Why the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
I played that video because I think it is the last time that our country has been rallied around some big purpose. We'll wait a second to go to the next. Okay, so in 1962, President Kennedy said, "We choose to go to the moon, and not because it's easy, but because it's hard, and because it is a mission worthy of our best efforts." So the president committed the country to a great mission, which created opportunities for the Black female mathematicians featured in Hidden Figures. And then Neil Armstrong, who was the first person to land on the moon, said that he wasn't getting into that rocket ship until Katherine Johnson specifically mapped his way back home. I'll play about a minute of the short video from Dr. King.
Vote. But in winning victories like the Civil Rights Bill of 64 and the Voting Rights Bill of 1965 around the issue of segregation and voting rights, we discovered that these legislative strides did very little to improve the lot of the millions of Negroes in the ghettos of the North and in the nation generally. In other words, it did very little to penetrate the lower depths of Negro deprivation in communities all over.
So what Dr. King said is that while the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act were necessary, it actually did very little to help blacks. So what I believe is that the free enterprise system is worth protecting. The situation today is that blacks are at the bottom of everything economically in our country, and this is leading to avoidable hopelessness, and I think it is a threat to our collective prosperity. So I think the solution is just do business. The pathway from poverty to prosperity is not a mystery. It begins with entrepreneurial-led economic activity. But you can't have a business without a customer. So I did a study of the 2010 census, and this is the results of it. It's something I call the State of Black America. I did this in 2018. I think what this shows is that the business participation gap leads to the community wellness gap. So these figures, again, are from the 2010 census. It showed this is revenues by employees, with employees by ethnicity. So majority-owned companies, it would have been 9.4 trillion, women $1 trillion, Asians $455 billion, Hispanics $276 billion, and blacks $98 billion. Even though blacks have double the educational achievement of Hispanics. But even that number is not a real number. A lot of it is, frankly, it's very low margin corporate pass-through numbers, so they get credit for big numbers without doing much. So the result of that, as of 2018, blacks were the only group in the United States that made less than they did in the year 2000. And black boys are the least likely of any group to escape poverty. In fact, 70% of black children that are in the middle class are likely to fall out of the middle class by the time that they're adults. So if you're not black, why should you care? I think that is because our country's in trouble. The continued and accelerating black economic regression has consequences for the nation. And one is that young people are confusing socialism with social good. So the opportunity is for us to cooperate and innovate our way out of the challenges that our country is facing. And we do that by proving that the free enterprise system works for everybody. So I say after 50 years, it's time for us to do something that works. Martin Luther King said in 1964, of the good things in life, the Negro has half, and of the bad, he has a double share. Say not much has changed since that time, and that the philanthropist must not overlook the circumstances that make philanthropy necessary. So what I believe is that blacks have an economic ecosystem problem, not a real estate problem. So new buildings are not going to solve the challenges faced by blacks. So if any of you know Chicago, where the South Loop used to be the South Side, and the West Loop, which is the hottest part of the city now, used to be part of the West Side. So they poured lots of investment in that area, but none of the people that used to live there anymore. So what I believe is that philanthropy of the 1900s was a lot more impactful because the industrialists, as they call them at that day, were responsive to Booker T. Washington's call to people of goodwill to support his efforts to make America's promise accessible to all. In fact, he gave a very famous speech where he said, America's never going to be what it can be until blacks are included in the economy. We don't need to live next to you, but we have to be a part of the economy. So if you ask yourself, where in the world are poor people healthy, educated, and safe? And conversely, where are affluent people, regardless of their race, not healthy, educated, and safe? The answer is nowhere. I think Michael Jordan would qualify as Black. He's as healthy as his behavior. His kids are pretty well educated, and you can't get near him, so he's pretty safe. So the question is, how do groups go from poverty to prosperity? There's only one way, and that is entrepreneurial-led economic activity, which leads to the appreciation of education and social capital. Social capital is when you reach back and you pull people from your community forward, but more importantly, you create an aspirational roadmap for your young people so they know where to place their bets. This man, Earl Neal, who was a lawyer, helped every Black business person I know in Chicago in my generation. So I say, if you want more fishermen, start buying fish. If we fix the demand problem, the supply problem will take care of itself. So I've asked this question about 1,000 times, and it is, name 2 famous Black entrepreneurs who would be nationally known with no connection to sports or other forms of entertainment. And 1,000 times of me asking, not one person has ever been able to answer that question. So why is that important? Because Black kids who are trapped in poverty can't either. The market tells them to place their bets on sports and entertainment, and that's exactly what they do. So what I think is that we need fewer saviors and more business partners. The challenge you have is that Black boys rarely see Black men doing anything except entertaining people. While I think it's noble and helpful for other people to help anybody, it does reinforce their own inferiority complexes when they never see anybody like them who is doing anything except entertaining people. So I believe history shows that economic cooperation of the Black and white business community always leads to progress in the country. So this man that was on the cover, there were 2 men, Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. Julius Rosenwald was the CEO of Sears. He responded to Booker T. Washington's call to make the country better. Together, they built 5,300 schools in the South, which is how Blacks got educated. Out of that, they created trade skills. They created the Negro Business League. And then out of that came the Black Wall Streets. So imagine 110 years ago, in the middle of the Jim Crow South, you could have prosperous Black communities. There was nobody trying to save them, for sure. But in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is Booker T. Washington dubbed Black Wall Street, had its own airport. They had private airplanes in greater proportions than whites. But the government didn't do its job in protecting its citizens equally. And out of that came the Tulsa Massacre. So while I think we've made some progress, I believe we have a lot of unfinished business. Chicago used to be the mecca of Black opportunity. That's why we had lots of migration into Chicago from Blacks out of the South. Even though Blacks in the South worked at higher rates than Blacks in the North, they left because of no dignity. So these men, they're all named Johnson, none of them were related. They created a pathway for success for Blacks in Chicago. And by the way, I believe Chicago was also a better city during that time. In the early 1970s, the Black business community and the white business community got together and they said, Blacks are going to have political power, whites have economic power. Let's create an Atlanta that works for everybody. And then Maynard Jackson said, I'd rather there be weeds on the runway than Blacks not participate in the development of that airport. And today, Atlanta is a better city for everybody. It's very different than it was in the early 1970s. In fact, Atlanta now is the mecca of Black opportunity. If you're Black and you're looking for opportunity, you go to Atlanta. And the last little slide is me and a friend of mine I know a little bit about. What most people don't know is that our president was actually, former president, was lifted by Black entrepreneurs. when I was 34 in 1995, I sold a company. I decided I was going to build a house in a Black neighborhood. And what I thought we needed was economic integration, where a lot of other people thought we needed racial integration. So I started a company called Urban Fishing Development. It comes from the saying, if you give a man a fish, that whole thing. So the government started to tear down public housing. I bought a bunch of land. I built houses, named them after famous African Americans. And today, that neighborhood is what I envisioned it would be, which is an economically integrated Black neighborhood, and things are better for everybody. In fact, it's the only Black neighborhood in the country that I know of that is better off today than it was in the year 1967. And I'm not that smart or that rich, but I think economics, just like gravity, works the same for everyone. In 2009, after President Obama was elected, I got invited by the Indian ambassador to the U.S. to take a tour of India. And it was a really great trip. I met somebody in the central bank that kind of gave me the story of India. Said in 1991, they had a new finance minister. They figured out socialism doesn't work. They started to free their economy. And then the government started doing business with their small entrepreneurs, which prepared them for the international markets. And then in a period of 20 years, India and China collectively took 750 million people out of poverty. That's double the population of the United States. So how did they do it? Since the United States is 70% of the world's outsourcing market, U.S. business just did business with capable Asian entrepreneurs. They weren't trying to save Indian kids. They didn't have any diversity or commitment programs or anything like that. They just did business with capable Asian entrepreneurs. They created an aspirational roadmap for their young people, and now they have transformed their economy. So I created something called the Lead Partner Program. What the Lead Partner Program says is to just do business. But we want to tie opportunity to responsibility for pulling other people along. So the responsibility of the participating CEO is to have one or more significant relationships with a Black company. So look at your categories to spend and then just pick one and you're done. Tell your CIO, pick one and you're done. Tell your CFO, pick one and you're done. But then be open to innovative collaboration ideas from Black vendors that can benefit your company. And then ask other people to follow your lead. The responsibility of the Black company is to, one, identify a clear value proposition, because if you can't do that, you can't be in business. Number two, take on the role of the mentor. So the Black companies become the prime and the subs, the mentors and the proteges. And then take on some what I call community-based microfinance efforts. So we fund small Black IT companies. We fund something called Mowers and Blowers. And we want to do something called a housing for tutoring exchange, where we give honor roll Black college students a place to live in exchange for mentoring and tutoring elementary and high school kids. What I believe is that for both urban and rural America, if we're not involved in the digital industry, we're going to be poor. IT, or digital in general, is going to go from 5% to 10% of the economy shortly. Those people that are not involved in it are going to be left out of the economy. So I'm going to play a couple videos here for you.
My name's Adam Wisniewski. I grew up in Evanston. I live here in Chicago. Finding young Black professionals that are successful and have done really well is extremely inspiring. There's not a ton of people that look like me that are in that role. So it was very inspiring to not only meet them and meet Robert and see all the successes he's had with his various businesses, but for him to take the time to mentor me and take me under his wing has been tremendously valuable. I was one of those individuals that worked at EKI Digital, started off here and ended up transferring over and starting my own business. EX3 Labs has experienced hyper growth over the last 2 years. we have 15 Fortune 500 companies as clients. I've been excited to be able to grow EX3 Labs to where it is today, but none of that really would have happened without the mentorship that I had. And I think that ability to pay it forward is tremendously valuable and tremendously important, especially as it relates to African-American community.
Okay, one of the challenges I think that we face is that really young, talented people like Adam typically don't have a network that they can go and where somebody's going to help pull them forward. There's lots of young men like that. So we think is that kind of it's our responsibility, and I'm saying our responsibility because I'm 60 now, is to create a pathway of opportunity for those young people. And I believe that we owe it to those that came before us to do something for those that are going to come after us. So now I'm going to play another short video.
My name is Micah Askew. I'm 15 years old.
He came to us and requested a new cell phone. We declined the offer. He took it upon himself to look outside, and he asked how much we were paying that gentleman to cut our grass. And later on that evening, he came to us with a business card that he created. And it started with one lady at my church. She was our first client on the west side.
We moved further and branched out to landscaping and more properties and commercial properties, whether it be hospitals, clinics, etc.
And I was listening to WVON, and I heard Robert interviewing some gentleman from University of Illinois. And at some point, Robert mentioned mowers and blowers.
At that time, we were hearing about snow removal. So at the time, we were still pretty small size. We only had one truck. We didn't have any snow materials. And once winter and fall started to roll around, we were like, okay, we have the workforce, we have the experience with landscaping. And so I think we'll be able to translate that to snow removal.
He gave us the seed money so we can buy our first sets of snow blowers.
Since the snow investment from Robert Blackwell Jr., we were able to not only start the snow removal program and that other side of the business, but we were able to obtain several building portfolios, one with 17 properties in it. Without that investment, we've not been able to do so many of the things we've done so far.
Okay, so you can see that young man is going to be somebody, I believe he's going to be somebody really special. Unfortunately, we have lots of young men like that who don't have people that they can turn to that can help them be in business, learn about business. So this is something, again, an issue we want to address. So in the Alpha mission, which I call is a mission worthy of our best efforts, it is focused on, in this case, Chicago, being a leader in Black business participation, creating a pathway for ending once and for all the generational poverty of our Black citizens. So the outcomes of this was, by 2025, $2 billion in Black business, which is a third of 1% of the Chicagoland economy. It's not very much. We think that'll lead to a 50% drop in Black crime, and we're looking for 1,000 Black boys to pass a calculus test. Because we think if you can pass a calculus test, you can do anything. So we came up with the idea of, we call a digital innovation and commercialization campus. It is a modern version of the Black Wall Street, which is a live-work ecosystem. So the idea is we're going to hire 100 what we call digital quants who serve companies, but in exchange for housing, they have to mentor and tutor 5 people. So we go from 100 to 500 to 2,500. And there is no philanthropy, no government programs. It comes by solely through the exchange of value and people just doing business. So this in Omaha, we came up with Omaha is one of the cities we're working in, and we came up with this little video, which I'll show you about 30 seconds of. Okay. Well, I think you get the idea. So what this is what we call the ecosystem of cooperation. And when we went to Omaha, I got a chance to present this to the Omaha Chamber of Commerce. We've actually presented this to several chambers of commerce. And one of the CEOs from the Omaha Chamber said, "I like this. I want to be a part of it. We're going to spend $500 million on digital transformation." So now we're working with them. So this depends on people just doing business. So business leaders and let's say government procurers. So the idea is we get people, these alpha mission partners who are customers impact partners like universities and accelerators, the alpha mission board, which is comprised of both Black and white business leaders. You have Black vendors, existing local, recruited and created. And out of that, by doing business, we fund this community impact, which is employment, business shared services, housing, and microfinance. So we have actually started another company called Quant 16. And what Quant 16 does is it helps companies find efficiencies using algorithms and analytics, find efficiency in their vendor spend, and it also helps them find the Black and Hispanic companies that they can do business with. The companies don't have to pay anything. We take a 2.5% portfolio management fee. It comes from the vendors. And out of that, we fund the Alpha Mission microfinance pool. So again, all the customers have to do is just do business. We help them find the companies they can do business with. And then out of that, we fund the Alpha Mission pool, which is employment, entrepreneur-led employment in childcare, strategic sourcing, mowers and blowers, which is the landscaping thing we talked about, property management. We also have what we call business support funds so that Black professional services companies get paid to service emerging businesses. And also we have money for what we call our little Shark Tank funds. And then we have the Housing for Tutoring Exchange. So the idea is that you get opportunity, employment, and we have employment at all levels. And this is going to be too dense to read, but this was a plan for Omaha. So by December 2025, the idea is we hire 1,120 people. We would create 1,600 units of housing, which is the 1,120 employees plus 500 for the Housing for Tutoring Exchange. And if you multiply that by 5, you get 8,100. And then we fund the Black professional services companies that end up helping the emerging Black businesses. We fund entrepreneurs. So one of the things with the neighborhood beautification, we take people who would come out of jail or otherwise underemployed. They get salary of $30,000 plus housing in exchange for the mentoring and tutoring. We fund entrepreneurs, neighborhood entrepreneurs, so that they can end up making sure that their neighborhoods are beautiful. And we think there's been a lot of research that's been done to show that if these neighborhoods are beautiful and you create economic opportunity, they'll be stable and safe. And this is how I think we're going to finally solve the problem in our city of the south and west sides. And frankly, it's not just that, it's lots of places in Illinois. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Troy and kind of answer any questions that anybody might have.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for taking us through this journey, because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm over here trying to comment in the background, listen, taking my little notes of how you walked us through everything from history, but also talking about what future looks like. And one thing, that landed with me is seeing this come into fruition and seeing how you came with a plan. And we talked about this in the backstage. I want to bring this as a first question here as we're waiting for everyone to get back ready to go. You had said a key formula to get result, to really apply in business. And the formula is results equals quality of strategy plus execution divided by time. And I'd love for you to kind of unpack that and how you apply that formula to Alpha Mission?
Sure. So again, the formula is that results equals the quality of strategy plus execution divided by time. So you always want to start with specifically what you want to get accomplished. You create a strategy that makes you unique and loved or trusted by a customer in a category. You create an efficient execution engine, which is people, processes, tools, and facilities, and then you set a time frame. So in this case, the results we want are $2 billion of black business, a 50% drop in crime, and 1,000 black boys that pass a calculus test. So those are the results that we want. The Alpha Mission is the strategy that we're using to accomplish that, and the time frame is December 2025. So that in our business, we kind of apply that to that formula to everything in business.
I love that. And thank you for kind of taking how that formula applies in this situation. Now that I've had everyone back on the panel, one thing I kind of want to get into, you touched on a lot of tough points that if we can all be blunt, which I'm sure we all can in this moment, you know, as people of color, as black men, as we're talking about black businesses, black professionals, black communities, there's a lot going on that, you know, we're still probably hanging on from summer 2020, but obviously way before that even happened and occurred, you know, as we're seeing the transition. You know, one thing you had talked about, Robert, was creating a clear value proposition. And so I would love to go around the room. I'll start with first with you, Robert, just thinking about, you know, how did you come to the clarity around who you are, how you're going to show up, and how you move your business forward as of now?
Well, listen, I was, I'd say I've been luckier than a person with my IQ deserves to be. I started out having two great parents, and I would say it was fortunate for me that my parents were 20 and 23 when I was born. So they had no dough, but I have very smart, educated parents, and they kind of gave me a set of rules to follow. So I grew up under segregation. I lived in all black neighborhoods, and to me, that was just kind of life was good. But since my family didn't have any money, I had to go figure out how to make money myself. And luckily, my father, who is a really, really smart man, told me that, he said, in life, the only thing you have is your name. You can always make more money back, but you can't get your name back. The other thing he said to me is if I give 100%, I may not be the best in the world, but I'll be in the top 5%. So for me, my goal in life is to be the best in the world at something. So whenever we go into business, if we don't have the chance to be number one in the world and do something big and profound, we kind of don't get involved with it.
I love that. I love that. And I want to pass the baton over to Cebien. You know, I've only been able to see the surface of your amazingness and how you've gone through certain things, but you care to share also your vantage point, your perspective of how to go about that and your identity and how you show up now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. And so when you talk about value proposition, and especially Black business owners, Black leaders, in identifying and positioning themselves in the marketplace, for me, it's really not being afraid to shift and pivot and test and really rely on your strengths, exactly like where you excel. And what I mean by that is not trying to replicate, quote unquote, what you see other Black businesses or Black leaders doing, but really honing in on what am I strong at that I am extremely confident in, where it takes no effort for me to produce. And for me, that is the strongest place that you can start in identifying and really positioning your value prop in the marketplace and in the ecosystems that you will create and serve. Because if I myself, for example, go out and try to replicate what Mr. Blackwell is doing, I can only do that to a certain extent successfully because I am not him, right? That is his unique will of operation, and he has the formula which he's laid out, and he can really, I assume, because he's done this he's articulated it very well, that he can take this and replicate it very easily in different cities. And so he's already created that roadmap. And so for me, it would take a lot more effort if I tried to use his value prop as mine versus myself, where I know my strengths as a Black leader, as a Black entrepreneur, as a Black man, Black father, etc. I know that my strength is around professional development, where I can upskill, where I can train, where I can show, where I can strategize with other individuals on how to hone in on those skill sets. That is where I reside. That is my strength. That is my value prop in my industry and in my market. And so I lean on that. And that provides an opportunity for me to then elevate other folks and help them figure out exactly where they can position themselves and strengthen themselves and identify what their value prop is. And so all of that to say is, don't be afraid of settling. And when I say settling, I mean being comfortable where your current strengths are and building on that, and not going out of the gate trying to replicate what you see your counterparts doing because they're successful at it. So I hope that that resonated and makes sense, Troy. But that's what I wanted to add to the conversation.
Oh, it resonated. It resonated. We appreciate that. And I want to pass the baton over to Bruce, thinking about your years in business and what you have done, what you have achieved, and how you got to where you are now. What is your definition of the value proposition? How have you positioned yourself as a Black business, as a Black professional, to get the success that you've achieved today?
Well, as Robert talked about, a lot of us have been fortunate. We've been fortunate to have good parents. I was fortunate to have great parents, live in a two-parent household for a portion of my life. Both my mother and father were accomplished people in both business and education. My father was an entrepreneur. His father was an entrepreneur. So I was fortunate to be in, as Robert also indicated, we were in an all-Black environment, but on the south side of Chicago in a community called Chatham, in many ways, it was our little Camelot. I mean, we did everything anybody could do. We played hockey in the wintertime when we put water out over the park, and we played basketball in the summertime. We had Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and after-school programs and all kinds of wonderful things in a wonderfully middle-class Black community that was basically made up of school teachers and bus drivers and entrepreneurs and people from so many different areas. But en masse, there was a lot of strong culture that believed in excellence. And the thing about excellence is it's everywhere. In Robert's presentation, we saw excellence from Booker T. Washington to the great NASA scientists, Hidden Figures, Catherine. We think of Mark Dean, who, co-created the IBM PC. And so the wonderful thing about my experience in the world of technology is I like to say technology always gives you a chance to get back on the horse. Sometimes our community has been overly critical with failure. But today's world, you can fail a couple of times, but if you dust yourself up and get back up and get in the game, you can find yourself being phenomenally successful the second, third, fourth, or fifth time around. And of course, there's so many easy ways and new opportunities, and no one is brilliant and expert in all areas. I can think in my years of the computer industry and the IT services area, where many technologies that have come to the fore were early written off. The PC was deemed as unbusiness capable. Mobile was considered to be too spooky, and everybody was risk averse. And then the cloud was something, why would anybody trust the cloud? And of course, now these things have become commonplace, and we know just in the last 10 years, billions have been made in all of these categories, and more will be made in the next few years. So it's an awesome and wonderful time to not only look at your strengths, but look at what you're truly curious about and pursue that curiosity with a passion, and don't let it go until it blesses you. And so, I can think of a time when, speaking of President Obama, when there was a time he gave a talk, a State of the Union, and there were some entrepreneurs that were sitting next to Michelle, and everybody wondered, who are these guys? And nobody really kind of heard of them. They started a little company called Instagram, and it was maybe 7 or 8 people. And I think before they got up to 20 employees, as we all know today, Instagram was sold to Facebook for in excess of $1 billion. And that company has become pretty significant role player in the social media space. So again, you don't have to make everything or roll your own yourself. Many entrepreneurs and innovators are finding good opportunities and mergers and acquisitions and taking things that other people have cast aside and picking them up and moving forward and applying them in new ways. And so I made a lot of my goal right now to be all about being just as nosy as I've ever been, just as curious as I've ever been, and looking for applied innovation to show the way for new opportunities that both not only open the door for myself, but more importantly, get other people involved in the process. And what Robert has done with this brilliant architecture that he describes as the Alpha Mission is that's what it's all about, creating pathways for others to benefit from these things that many of us have had great benefit from and want to see. The American economy could be so much stronger if there was full participation of those who have not been given all of the opportunities they need to be given to bring innovation and new ideas to the marketplace. Post-Reconstruction, African Americans raced to the patent office as they were racing for their freedom. And yet that has not been replicated in all of these years. So it's time for a new era of creativity and innovation. And I'm glad to be able to participate in the Alpha Mission to bring it forward.
Ooh, you took us there. I just need a minute as a mod to just, y'all need to marinate what Bruce just said. Hopefully y'all didn't miss it. Go back and watch it in the replay. And maybe what Bruce shared, now you're going to look at what the presentation that Robert so beautifully, gracefully presented to all of us in a different lens. And, it's doing the work. I think, Robert, what you've been echoing a lot is a lot of people talk, a lot of people empathize, they visualize, they put things on paper, but they don't implement, they don't execute. They may have a plan. They just we acknowledge it's there. We acknowledge things need to change. We acknowledge things need to move forward. But what you're suggesting, what you're proving, not only with your words, but with your deeds, is the actual impact of action. Now, I want to pivot really quick and talk about, if for people currently watching live and those who will be watching in the replay, wherever channel you're consuming this content from, they're probably thinking a few things of, that was great. Now what? Or that was great. Can it happen? Like it's not that a lot of people aren't excited. They're not, but it's like, how can I support? How can I be a part not only of what Alpha Mission is creating and doing, but just the bigger picture, what you have displayed so graciously of how do we move Black businesses forward going into 2022 and beyond. And I guess I'll pass, the round robin, and I'll go to obviously Robert first. What are your thoughts on what would you encourage other Black businesses to do to move the needle forward for us collectively?
Well, I think you've got supply and you have demand. You cannot have a business without a customer. That's number one. So the challenge that you have in the Black community is that others don't face is what I call the perception of incompetence. So I'd say, imagine this: you've got somebody white, you've got somebody Chinese, you've got somebody Indian, and then you have me. You got to bet $10,000 on who's the worst at math. And if you don't think it's a trick question, I'm going to lose every time. The reason why is that people think that Black people, no, I don't think whites wake up in the morning saying, how can we make sure Black people are miserable? But when you look at people, what I do think is there's a lot of people that look at Black people like they're tall children. They want to save them. In fact, if you think of what the definition of an inner city program is, you could just call it a little Black kid program. And when people are looking at you through, I call it sympathetic eyes, they don't see you as equals. They look at you as somebody that they have to support. And I think that's a problem for us. And you can see that in the lack of participation in the modern parts of the economy for Blacks. So one is why we have to advocate for Black participation in all parts of the economy. If, however, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you cannot fool yourself into thinking that being Black's a value proposition. You just have to be world class. So if you have made it, I can't say made it, but if you've had some measure of success, you also have some responsibility to pull people forward, to advocate for people. But even if you're not Black, what can you do? Ask the company that you're working for who you're doing business with. Do we have any meaningful relationship with Black companies? Not where you're giving money to this charity and that charity, and you talked about sympathy and empathy. I think a lot of people sympathize with Blacks. It's poor Blacks, and let's make sure that they get this help, that help, the other help, but they don't empathize with them. That's a totally different thing because you don't have a shared experience. So what I do think is that if we ask people to just do business, that's all you got to do. Ask your friends, your companies to just do business. And then ask those people that you do business with who they're helping. Because what I think people are confusing with socialism versus mutualism is based on helping people, but it's voluntary. That is what happens in communities. You help one another. That's our history. In fact, if it wasn't for that, we would have never gotten through the civil rights era. None of that would have worked. In fact, the bus boycotts only survived because Blacks were willing to give each other rides to work and things like that. We had a community, and a community is not a neighborhood. A community is a group of people that share a common culture. And I think not only do we have a Black community, but we also need to think about saving this country, because we do have a special country and Black people don't have anywhere to go. We have a great but imperfect country. And I think just like Booker T. Washington, who actually believed that Blacks had a special place in this country, we better work together to make sure that this system works for everybody, or it won't be the first time in history that people have lost the good things that they have.
Now I want to pass that baton over to you, Cebien. And before I even pass you to you real quick, one thing I want to think about and echo in this moment is that even in this conversation, we're having different generations of Black businesses, of Black professionals having this dialogue. And in many cases, you don't see this happening at scale of different generations, because we have 5 generations in the workforce right now currently. Imagine if we all came together, not only choose to active listen from their perspective vantage point, because we all have different vantage points on chasing the same destination, the same goal. And I think sometimes we can get lost in formalities and ways that we communicate and how we communicate, the words that we choose, the mannerisms of what makes sense if you're doing, Malcolm X versus MLK type vibes in a business sense, if you understand where I'm going with that, thing. But I think even just having this conversation and what we're doing here is a sense of stirring up the pot a little bit. So with that being said, I'm going to pass over to Cebien. What are your thoughts on what's things that Black businesses need to do now if we're trying to move the needle? And you can even speak, coming from your vantage point and your experiences, and how you admonish clients as well.
Yeah, Troy, you sort of like stole my thunder there, because I was going to come in with saying like this is what we're doing here in this conversation is execution. And so you have Troy, who came in and initiated this forum and then partnered with Robert, and then Robert brought in Bruce, and here we are conversing and dialoguing as Black males, Black professionals, and Black leaders within our own rights on execution and how you come together to effectively and successfully collaborate. And so I affirm everything that you just said. But what I wanted to add is, I think it was Bruce who said, we as and we're going to be very blunt here, as a Black community, we are overly, I think he said, we are overly critical, or can be overly critical of failure. But in that same sense, I think that we can also be overly critical of one's success as a Black individual. And what I mean by that is seeing someone else that looks like us succeed, and knowing that we are putting forth effort and have not yet achieved quote unquote success can bring on intimidation, and can bring on, I would say, even the selfishness of why them and not me, especially if you're in the trenches doing the work, right? And you see someone else who looks like you, maybe doing the same work or something different, but they've achieved success. And so for me, when Robert talked about creating this ecosystem of cooperation, I am all about the how, right? As a strategist, I'm all about the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s on how we do it, make it very tangible. And for me, this is a small sampling of how we can make something that was concept very tangible and then lead into execution. And so I think it starts with conversation. And I think it starts with examples of conversations like this that are occurring, and not stopping here. It's great to have this conversation, but how do I then take this conversation and put it into my ecosystem or my circle of influence, my industry of authority, and start to educate and bring visibility and awareness to this conversation and dialogue that's happening, so it can increase exposure and serve as an example of this is where you can start. You don't have to go big picture immediately. You can start here by having a conversation and really putting the framework together on how do you move from conversation into actual execution, and then support, et cetera. And so that ecosystem of cooperation, this is a great example of that. And I think if we take this and then share it, increase visibility and exposure, that can then turn into execution in other realms of business, and folks really trying to do something within their own circle or in their own environments. But for me, I am all good with the talk. I am all good with sharing ideas, but it's the how do we execute. And so for me, it's we're going to take this conversation. I'm going to take this conversation and I'm going to share it with my circle of influence. And then from there, get them connected to the folks here so they can then, continue to build and continue to network. And we build this ecosystem of cooperation like Robert talked about. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to you, Troy. Thanks.
Oh, I appreciate, your vantage point. And again, I want to echo just the different vantage points just in this moment on the panel. I know we're almost hitting an hour. I don't know if the gentlemen want to go. I feel like there's a second wind coming on. We got room now. We can do an after party now right here on the live. So I just want to sow that seed. If you want to kind of get comfortable,
we got a few more. We got a few more minutes. I think we'll be good.
So one thing I want to echo really quick. I see we have a question, and Robert and even Cebien and Bruce, you both kind of elaborated on this in various ways, and I want to be a little bit more direct, led by the question. And so, Robert, this question, we'll start off with you. When we think about, people who are not, not people of color, who are consuming this, who is engaging this in live or in the replay, and they've listened from start to finish. They've been active listeners. Maybe they sparked a lot since summer of 2020. They've been more engaging, different things from a business professional perspective. How would you say people should be partnering with Black businesses? And what would you say you would demand or ask of people to in a mannerism to support us?
Well, here's what I would say. I wouldn't demand anything because what you want is the voluntary cooperation of people of goodwill. You don't want to hit somebody over the head. And I have a young woman that works for a company. She used to live in public housing. We hired her, and she went from making $13 an hour to $50,000 a year. And she was able to move out of public housing and take care of her family. And she said, and our company is very heavily Black and Hispanic, which is an anomaly in our industry. And she said, Robert, I just love this company because I get to meet people from all backgrounds, and I get to know what their holidays are. She said, I've never experienced, the world outside a poor Black community. And what I told her is that you don't have to hate anybody else to love your own people. So I think there's way too much acrimony in the world where people are yelling at each other, and people have some, I think, which are some misconceptions. I wrote an article once called We're the Best of Us and They're the Worst of Them. So when people are looking at other people who are bad and saying, oh yeah, Black people are like that, or we're looking at bad people who might be white and say, yo, yeah, that's because they're white. It's not, we shouldn't be looking at people like that. We should look at people like individuals. So imagine that you are, let's say, on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like that team because I like Tom Brady. How much do you think his teammates like and appreciate him? I think they like him a lot. They're winning with him. He seems like a good man. He didn't have to prove that he's not a bad person just because he's white. Neither should our people have to prove that they're not criminals. In fact, there's a very big misperception. Since I'm a libertarian, by the way, I talked to one misperception I think Republicans have about Blacks and crime. So people talk about like Black on Black crime, which I think is a term we should stop saying. We have criminal on Black crime. Nobody says white on white crime, even though most of the violence against whites is by other whites. So the other thing I would say, which is correlation versus causation. So everybody would have heard the biggest issue we have in our community is out of wedlock births. So if that were the case, that correlation between out of wedlock births and crime, there is some correlation, but is it causation? So it turns out it's not causation, because if you look at Scandinavian countries and France, they have much higher out of wedlock birth rates than the United States does. In fact, Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico all have pretty low out of wedlock birth rates. However, New York and Mexico City are about the same size. New York has, I believe in 2019, they had 500 murders, and Mexico City had 21,000. So the real correlation is when economic opportunity aligns to criminal activity, that is where crime comes from. So it seems to me that is a very easy problem to fix by getting people to do business. And when the alternative for economic participation, when you have alternatives for economic participation, you get lower crime, and then you have much healthier neighborhoods. So I think that is, frankly, what it is that we need to focus on. And by the way, stop looking at people solely by the tone of their skin. Look at people like they're individuals. Imagine we went back in history. Black people didn't get out of slavery by themselves. They didn't get over Jim Crow by themselves. There were white people of goodwill that helped us. The government made it illegal to educate Blacks. Government's done a lot of horrible things to Blacks. That'd be a whole nother conversation. But we depended on people of goodwill to help us. And we should treat people with dignity, regardless of what their skin tone is. I think God blessed us being in this country. Now we just have to work together to make a more perfect union. So that's my little diatribe on that.
I like to go back to a comment that Troy made, which I think was quite perceptive. And he talked about the fact that on this call that we have right here, we have multiple generations engaging in an intelligent, respectful, creative dialogue around solutions. And we're talking about getting some work done in a real way that can make an impact and make a difference. And this is one thing that we need a lot more of, because there are some very compelling signs that show this kind of conversation and this kind of, the only thing that's missing here is we probably need, the next conversation after this ought to be, more more diversity in terms of women involved. But let's do this. You know, one of the things that kind of troubled me prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, is I noticed a lot of people kind of, you know, go into their respective corners. Women go into their corners, blacks go into their corners, whites go into their corners. But what I see here in this call this evening with folks, you know, that span the range of demographics and age and experience and maybe even geography, is this can be very, very exciting, very creative, and very compelling. And this is really the business case for equity and inclusion. That when we put teams together that have this kind of diverse complex, but like Robert talked about in his formula, you know, have a strategy, have an intent, and have a time-bound commitment to achieving a goal. And that's very, very exciting. So again, I think that this is what we need more of. I think there's a lot of respect that people have across the board that has not had an opportunity to be heard. You know, sometimes young people think, well, you know, older generations don't listen to us. That's not true. A lot of times people think there's not respect for the discipline and the skill sets we have. That's not true either. And what I'm starting to see is groups coming together, learning from each other. Right now, in the last 12 months, more African Americans are moving forward in private equity and venture capital at any time in America's history. And instead of talking about ball players getting a big check and going buying a big car, many of them are putting that check away for somebody to help them understand how to manage money. And they're coming back to the table as angel investors, venture capital investors, private equity investors. So this is an absolutely exciting time to have just tremendous respect for talent across the board, excellence that's showing up in all kinds of areas. So when you ask the question how to participate, I like to ask people to go to justdobusiness.biz, justdobusiness.biz, express your interest in this Just Do Business Alpha Mission concept, and then create these kinds of working groups. You know, Robert has been on a tear in the last 6 to 8 months. I mean, we've been to Indianapolis, we've been to Iowa, we've been to Minnesota. And the point is to get Alpha Mission groups, you know, gestating in these various communities. You know, doing $1 billion worth of business is not really that big a deal, but it's on the table for us to do. And there are leaders in every community that can say, man, we could do that. Because when you go to Minneapolis and you see a 3M, a Target, a US Bank, you go to Nashville and you see the health community and Vanderbilt and the HBCUs. You go to Atlanta, you see all the people converging on Atlanta with Georgia Tech and the HBCU technology centers that are springing up. Each one of those markets could be exploded by this business model that's been created with this Alpha Mission. And so this kind of calls could be going on multiplied around and saying, hey, wait a minute. You know, I was down in Atlanta just a couple of weeks ago, and I ran across this place called the Gathering Spot. And these were some guys that used to go to an HBCU together, decided that, you know, there needed to be a different model around co-working, networking, collaborating. And right in the middle of the pandemic, they put this thing together and it's blowing up. It's expanding to LA and to DC. These kinds of conversations about an Alpha Mission paradigm need to be gestating in Atlanta right now, need to be going on in Jackson and Memphis and some other kinds of cities. And so the folks that are hearing this today, I would encourage you to weigh in on this conversation on justdobusiness.biz. Let us know of your interest. And then all of the information that you've seen today, we'll be more than happy to share with you. And I guarantee you, if you got an airport and you have a PC and some broadband, Robert will be there giving this pitch whenever you say you want him to come, and you'll hear it right from the horse's mouth. And you may be the place. You know, Robert proved, you know, a lot. You know, he and I, again, we spend most of our business career in Chicago. But what we're not surprised to find is that other communities are like, hey, man, bring this out to where we are. Bring this out to Omaha. You know, bring this to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And if they're the ones that make it happen, we are just as happy as it's happening anywhere that people want to really do the work and prove that these kinds of economic opportunities should be available across the entire United States.
Bruce, I think that's a good point. I would just say, I know because Bruce and I have had these conversations. I think we owe it to those people that came before us to do something for the people that are going to come after us. We right now have benefited from the struggles that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents went through. So I believe that we owe it to them to do something that's going to create some hope and aspiration and opportunity for the generations to come. And I think, and this is just my own view, that if we don't do this, God's going to punish us for that. So.
Wow, this has been a journey. Now I'm going to give the audience 15 more minutes. That's it. I'm putting the cap on the greatness. If you want a part 2, let us know in the comments. And I want to also piggyback off of what Bruce said. If you're watching now live, or even if you're watching the replay, still feel free to ask questions. There was a lot of information that was given. I understand there might be a lot of time to process, to think through things. And we want this to be an ongoing conversation, to marinate. There's a lot more things to just making money. We want everyone to be, financially stable, but above and beyond that, we want to make a lasting generational impact within Black communities, within Black business infrastructure. So please, if you have any questions covered in Robert's presentation, or anything regarding, how can you in a Black business implement certain things, or any questions directly for us individually as Black professionals, feel free to let us know in the comments below. With that being said, and I keep echoing because I'm just enjoying the comment. I don't know about y'all. I'm gonna have a little fun for 10 seconds here. When Bruce was talking, I feel like I was back in the cookout. You got some lemonade and you just chilling. Like, Bruce, you can keep on talking. You can keep on talking and tell me the stories, okay, Bruce? You officially can tell the story whenever you want. One thing I want to piggyback on and kind of reset really quick. It's not all doom and gloom. What Robert has shared and what Bruce and Cebien has kind of echoed is there is progress being made. Obviously, we want more. Who doesn't want more? But we want to also echo and acknowledge that things are happening. Change takes time, patience, poise, and persistence. But also, we need other individuals. We need our counter sisters and brothers and BIPOC communities, but also non-BIPOC, white communities, white businesses, white professionals to hear us, to give us access, to have those conversations and dialogue. And so I kind of want to go around the room. I'm going to go with Cebien first here. And, I'll be very brief. The question I want to ask you is, think of a time where you were maybe early on in your career or where you are now, and you were trying to get to a certain access point. And talk about really quick how, you navigated having conversations, kind of letting people understand this is what I'm experiencing. I'm dealing with maybe this particular invisible wall, or maybe it is a visible wall, and how you walked through that process as a Black business.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Troy. And stop me if I get too long-winded, but I will say I'm a big advocate, especially when you're talking about, Robert mentioned talking about being vocal about, what especially if you're at a company, like who are they supporting, who are they connected to, et cetera. For me, I want to extract that vocalism because that was very essential and crucial to getting me into the seat of running and operating my own company, where I'm now elevating Black and brown faces, right? And so mentorship and sponsorship was extremely critical for my movement through my career and positioning me where I can now do the same and give back to those looking to move through their careers and position themselves eventually in a seat where they are influencers and decision makers. And so mentorship and sponsorship, and coupled with that word being vocal, were the three things that really help maneuver me through, help push me through my experience in going into the corporate space and typically being the one, and you all know what I mean, the one, the one that sat in seats with others that did not look like me. And so there was a lot of pressure there. And so I always had to be, there was a sense of being, I would say, confident, but not being threatening at the same time, especially when you are in environments where you are literally the minority and not the majority. And so being vocal and not being afraid to say, here is what I bring to the table. Here's the value that I'm adding. And here is what I'm contributing, and being unapologetic for it. Being unapologetic for what you're bringing to the table, how you're contributing, the successes and the wins that you are supporting and accomplishing, and also finding those folks that looked like me. And it might not have been in the same company, maybe it was in a community group or outside, but connecting with folks that look like me and initiating the conversation to ask them how did they get there, and not surface level, but really a real genuine interest of how did you get there, that where the seat that you're sitting in, I potentially eventually want to sit in that seat. So from where I am right now, how do I position myself to sort of maneuver? What skills do I need? What conversations do I need to have? And not only what conversations, but how do I have those conversations? How do I have conversations where it turns into a voluntary mentorship? How do I have conversations to where it increases my visibility enough to where some sponsors come in and say, I will advocate on your behalf in the rooms that you don't have access to yet, but I'm already in the room, so I can be your advocate and your ally. And so for me, it's all about being vocal. It's about making sure that you know and seek out mentorship. And eventually mentorship turns into sponsorship with the visibility of you sharing where exactly you want to end up, where none of us are mind readers. And so unless we are vocal in a good way about where we want to end up, and then surrounding ourselves and connecting us to the individuals that are in those seats already, I think a lot of us said it, we have a responsibility now that we're here, wherever here is for us as Black leaders. It is our responsibility to make sure that the others that look like us know that we're here and that we serve as an example, and they can connect with us, and not being afraid of connecting and saying, hey, Robert, love what you shared. How can we connect and further the conversation from where I am? Hey, Bruce, loved your perspective. How can I connect with you and use your influence, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a little long-winded, but love this conversation, which can go on forever, but I'll go ahead and turn over it back to you, Troy. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, you're perfectly good. See, that's always when it's almost to the close. People find that second gear, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna go for another hour. And I want to acknowledge some people who have given some comments. I see Calvin Brown. Thank you. You're watching from LinkedIn. Appreciate you saying this is great. This one. I'm going to show this one. I have to. We got Becca here, who's talking about, I have a lot of notes, y'all. I got notes. You hear that? People taking notes. People still take
That's
notes
awesome.
here. You see it's full. You see we have a lot of value here. We appreciate those who have been watching. Again, if you have any questions for us, even if you're watching in the replay, put it in there. I will get notification, and I will pass the questions on to Robert, Bruce, and Cebien, or myself if it's for myself. Please let us know if this was of value, because from what the Little Bird told me, for a few people on here, this is their first LinkedIn Live experience. I hope it was warm. I hope it was welcoming. And you can see, and I want to echo what Bruce said and tie in what Robert said about technology, and how we have the meme is we have the technology. And now, with the technology, we are able to reach people from multiple geographical locations to come and meet together and have intimate, real business conversations that matter. Not the platitude ones, not ones off the surface. Robert already gave us in the first 25 minutes of this live the blueprint. He told us the formula. We have the formula. We know what we need to do. And now we just need to have the conversations, be evangelists, be advocates, and move the needle forward. One last thing, or we're getting to the close, but one thing I really want to talk in that I didn't get a chance to touch on heavily, Robert, that I want to touch on you first. When you talked about Black companies taking on community enrichment responsibilities, right? And I loved how that was framed, because I know that's more specific and micro than Black businesses showing up, Black businesses just having the conversation. But taking on community enrichment responsibilities, and obviously you echoed that earlier, walk us through certain phases in Alpha Mission, both in Omaha and in Chicago as well. But I would love for you to kind of bring us back around to that again and just talk about that a little bit more detail, if you don't mind. You're on mute, Robert. Hold on.
Sorry. So the way that communities go from poverty to prosperity is entrepreneurial-led economic activity, which leads to the appreciation of education and social capital. Social capital is when you reach back and you pull people from your community along, but more importantly, you create an aspirational roadmap for your young people so they know where to place their bets. So we have all been benefited, I believe, from people that are in our sphere, our community, that were helpful to us when, frankly, we had nothing to offer to them. For sure, that was me. A lot of people, I would say Earl Neal was one. There were others that I could just go talk to. There was nothing that I could give them. They would listen to dumb ideas that I had. So none of us would be here if it wasn't for some sacrifice or some investment in human capital of our ancestors, our families, and other people, frankly, that we don't know. So when I lived on the South Side and I did development over there, I tried to go and meet most of the Black boys that were in our neighborhood. And one of the things that you can see with Black boys, which is different from other children, frankly, is you see them when they're 4 and 5 years old, they're bouncing and they're happy. But as they go from 5 to 7 to 10 and they're teenagers, you can see them getting more stressed, less happy, more convinced that the world is against them. So what I believe is that what we need to do, the most important thing that you can do for anybody is to show them love. And again, I think love is a verb. But also I would say the people that you help don't just have to be Black. You can help anybody. We've all been helped from somebody, I believe, that wasn't from our own family or our own race. You want to treat everybody with dignity. We want everybody to come on this journey with us. So we prove that this is the best country in the world. It's the place where more people have immigrated to the United States than all the countries in history combined. Even Africans are coming here. What we need to do is to make this country work for Black people. And you do that solely through voluntary cooperation. You're not going to coerce anybody into doing that, but just where we have, just like athletes do, frankly. Again, nobody's leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because there's a white quarterback. They're teammates. They look at each other like they're human beings. And we need to do the same thing. We get no value from trying to make white people feel guilty. What we need to do is say, we live in this country together. We need to work to make sure that the country lives up to its creed. And it is a place where everybody, regardless of where they come from, if they give their best efforts, they can be successful. And I think if we do that, we'll finally solve some of the problems that we've been dealing with for generations. So hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, you're good. So I'm going to hold us to the final stretch. We have less than 7 minutes because I feel a second win. I ain't trying to go to overtime now. I know we got to talk about these Tampa. What about the Bears? We're not going to talk about the Bears in this conversation. Huh?
Okay, if we were back in 1985, we would have had a different conversation.
I just knew I had to put that in there, but we got to give shout out and props to the GOAT, Tom Brady. But I digress. One thing I just want to kind of bring onto the close was, let us know that if this was of value to you. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not saying that for saying that. If you watch this in real time, or if you're discovering it now, you've gotten this far and you're watching the replay, let us know. Tag some people. Share this video out. Connect with those who you're seeing on the panel on LinkedIn. There's more conversations to be had. I would encourage you to connect with Robert and then learn more about the Alpha Mission program and what the initiatives are happening currently where I'm residing in Chicago, where a few of us are, and abroad as well. This can be replicated in other areas. There's a lot more to the story that we don't want to hold y'all. We don't want to hold y'all. There's too much greatness. I don't know about y'all, but I think we can deserve a part 2. I think we've gotten that wiggle, that room, that a part 2 might be here. So I'm just excited. I'm humbled to be among greatness, to have this conversation, to take us there from the history to the present and we're thinking about the future, but not just thinking about it, but putting it into action, creating a plan and having dialogue and having conversations to move this needle forward for us as Black communities, as Black professionals, but also not just us. Because when we do better, the whole world does better. So we don't want to just make it solid that it's just about us. It is about us, but it goes beyond that. If you support Black businesses and elevate us and give us more access, to educate, to teach us how to fish, right? I'm thinking about that from the early presentation slide, and going above and beyond that. Imagine what can be achieved in so many other categories for so many other people. But I get off my soapbox here. Y'all didn't come in for me. I am not the main attraction for now. So I just want to go around the room, if you don't mind, and any final parting thoughts. Let's keep it 2 minutes each, y'all. I'm going to keep your time 2 minutes each. Final thoughts. Again, recap of who you are, what you do, and where they can learn more about whatever mission or thing you have going on. And obviously, Robert, you can go first. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, listen, this has been great. So, Troy, thanks very much for organizing this. I would just leave people with this, is that remember, love is a verb. Love is not just a fuzzy feeling. It's what you do to create value for other people. And if you're in business, you cannot be in business looking at yourself. The role of a business person is to create value for somebody else. We live in a great country. I think people who've not traveled outside this country take for granted what a great life we have. We just need to make this country live up to, I would say, to its creed, where it's a place where you can, no matter where you came from, if you give your best efforts, it's a great place to be. And that's kind of my closing thoughts.
All right, Bruce, I'm going to pass the baton to you. I know you talked about justdobusiness.biz. I'm a phenomenal storyteller. You had me hooked from the moment you started. Okay, brother. Just tell us any final thoughts, any final reflections, anything that is going on that you want to articulate in this moment on the stage. The floor is yours.
Well, clearly coming out of the COVID experience, we all have been sequestered and probably been involved with more Zooms than we care to articulate. But it's time for us to explode out of our sequestration to really be advocates and evangelists for the kinds of ideas that we've heard today. Robert has laid a very clear and well delineated model. He's put it out here as kind of what I would call an open source solution. And like any good open source code, that means the more people that hack it, the better it gets. And so that's really what it's all about, is for you to do some growth hacking, some innovation hacking, some entrepreneurial hacking in your respective communities. But recognize that let's knit this cloth together. I mean, we really have an opportunity. One of the things I think is not happening, I'll be very brief, is that innovation is where you find it. And too many of our entrepreneurs have played small ball when they really needed to be thinking of scaling. And so that means that there may be some things that are well operational in Kansas City or St. Louis or Indianapolis or Minneapolis that should have well been translated to a Chicago, a Detroit, a Houston, and Los Angeles. But just people hadn't thought about it. Well, now is that time to say, okay, let me find like minds wherever they are. And so what LinkedIn and these other tools give us is a chance to connect with like-minded people of creative consciousness. And that person may be your best buddy, but happens to be 1,000 miles away. But don't let that impair you from creating scalable, impactful ventures that could bring the kind of much needed jobs and economic challenge or change to the very communities that are so challenged by the lack thereof. And so even in a great city like Chicago, like many cities, is a tale of two cities. There's boom times in some areas and other places are quite desolate. The Alpha Project and the Just Do Business Initiative is meant to say that if people would just do business, we could start to see those desolate landscapes change and be led by scalable Black businesses that Robert, as we've all talked about, reaching back. And if we could see Black businesses get 20, 40, 50, $100 million opportunities, and at the same time bringing a cadre of mentees along doing $1, $2, $3 million worth of business, rapid change could come to our communities in a positive way sooner rather than later. That's why we're having this call tonight, is that we believe we're the ones to make a difference right here and right now.
Ooh, speaking to my soul, Bruce. Speaking to my soul, brother. Cebien, the floor is yours. Any final thoughts, any final reflections, or anything that you're going on that you want to articulate in this moment? The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thanks, Troy, for putting this together, and Robert for that extensive and comprehensive walkthrough of potential, right? And so we're going to take that potential and materialize it across these different incubators that are going to sprout up from this conversation, right? And Bruce, I so appreciate your vantage point and how you share your knowledge and experience. And so what I will leave you all with is the word start. I don't want to make this conversation too overwhelming for folks. And so it's a lot of information, as Troy indicated, right? And so you're probably sitting down, and like the young lady said, she has like 4 pages of notes, right? And so I'm sure she's going to go back and review. But what do you do with that? Where do you start? You start where you are. And where you are right now is you can connect to every single individual that is part of this conversation. And so for me, connect with me. And when I say this, I don't say it for lip service. Connect with me on LinkedIn by finding my first and last name, which is on screen. And not just connect, but invite me to a conversation. And a conversation of just brainstorming and relationship building. And that's where you start. And so for this conversation to happen, it didn't just sprout up. It started with a conversation of relationship building, which then led to what you're experiencing today. And so for me, I leave you all with that. Just start. Start with connecting and building relationship. And then that relationship building will then catapult into other things and then eventually execution. But for me, it's just starting. And let's start with connecting with folks, and not just connecting, adding on that extra action of actually the invitation of dialogue and getting to know each other and building relationship, so we can actually get together and build that ecosystem of connection that Robert so eloquently shared with us earlier on. And so I'm going to leave it there. I said connect with me on LinkedIn, and then we'll take it from there and start to build and connect and network. This is Cebien. Thank you.
Oh, see, you all are so elegant with your words. I got the best seat in the house because I can sit and just listen like I'm real close. Some of y'all don't get my closest of the depths of what they're doing, and I'm loving the conversation. Again, let us know in the comments below if you enjoyed this. I enjoyed this. I'm gonna hype my own self up. I enjoyed you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming here, having this dialogue, having this conversation. It was needed. It's essential. And I want to give a few shout outs to Jeffrey Coleman, Owen Burtz, Candace Heckler. Even I'll actually show her comment too. We appreciate you as well. Thank you to all those who are watching live, those who are watching the replay. We hope you enjoyed this presentation, this conversation. And again, start. So take action. Follow us. See the links there. I'll leave a few more links that everyone here on stage have given in the comments below for people to reference to add more to their notes. And we want you to just move the needle forward. So let us know. Well, if we get enough buzz, we may do a part 2. We'll see what happens. So thanks again for you all for listening. We send you all much blessings. And again, take action. Take what you have heard today and apply it. Move the needle forward so change can happen, so the future can be achieved in what we're trying to do. And again, thank you all as well.
Take care. Thanks.